All right, we will start now. Welcome all to PMI UAE Chapter and welcome for tonight's webinar event, which hosted by Melanie Ross. Today's event is about the 7 mindsets of leading in a world of 4D. And this is the place to know more about what it means to be a leader and effective change agent in modern world businesses, which defined by digital, data, disruption, and design. Our host tonight is Miss Melanie, and we can call her Mel, I think.
Absolutely.
And Mel is a futures, thank you, and Mel is a futures leadership expert and coach, working with leaders all over the world, from ambassadors and CEOs to digital transformation experts. She began her path as the CEO and founder of digitalexperience.com agency, and later a member of digital strategy board at Disney, where she also began coaching and mentoring aspiring leaders. Following a role as CMO for a public listed global services organization, where Mel was employed to deliver an organizational-wide digital transformation program, which included the simplification and digitization of products and services. As co-founder of Folk Digital, Mel soon took over the helm of business now known as Adapt2 Digital, as a chief architect of the best practice framework for leadership and change in a world of 4D. Mel's also role is supporting to the global practitioner community of practice. Also, Mel continues to coach and mentor senior leaders and champions of changes, as well as now serving as a mentor of women in digital and businesses, and advising on digital transformation as board level for government and private sector. That's well, Mel, that's too much, and please start your event and welcome to UAE.
Thank you everybody for coming on today's webinar. So I'm coming to you from the UK, so it's Sunday for me here. So I haven't officially started my week, but I know that you are probably all at the end of energy. And I think one of the things I'd like to do very briefly, just to get a little bit to check start all my website. Just you, I'm probably here, probably at energy level 10, somewhere around a 9, if not a 9.5. If you could just pop into chat what energy level you feel. If you've had a really hard day, if you've had a difficult meeting, you might be more like a 5 or a 6. But just pop into chat. I've just popped my number in there. Just pop into the chat area what your energy level is at the moment, so that I know how high or leveling to be. It would be so. Just pop that in the chat for me. That would be great. Somebody said an 8, fantastic. You're a bit like me. I've got Ahmed as a 7. You're nearly there, Ahmed. Hopefully I can get you up to maybe an 8 presentation today. Okay, so it looks like we've got pretty much middle of the road. Well, let's see what we can do about that. So today I am going to talk to you about the 7 mindsets of leadership and change in a world of what I'm going to do for 7 mindsets. And all in the way that I'm and what I share with you today, I hope that what I'm sharing will add value and relevance to you, an individual, in practice, whether it's lead to help you with leaders around you. Now,
voice is not clear.
Say to you, there's a lot.
So maybe if we can, you can switch off the. Maybe you can switch off the camera, maybe you can continue. It's breaking. Only the video.
Yeah,
Stop the continue only with the sound.
Yeah, no worries at all. Let me do that. 1 second. Abdul.
I believe so.
Okay, perfect. I'll continue. So, as I was saying, a lot of work for us to get through today. And by the way, with the connection, we live in the middle of the country, so hopefully for the rest of today's session, it will be a lot easier for you to hear my voice. But as I was saying, I want to talk to you about the 7 mindsets of leadership and change in a world of 4D, how that feeds into, oh, brilliant. Thank you, Anne-Marie. I'm so pleased that you can hear me better now. So I'll feed the framework in, and also I really want at the end of today for each and every one of you to be able to take something of value for your own leadership profile away with you, as well as maybe some ideas for how you can engage leaders around you in your daily practice. Now, because there is an awful lot for us to cover today, I've done something really exciting. We've got a quiz, as you can see with the double Z there. So there's a bonus quiz. So what I'd like you to do is really try and stay energetic and motivated, and take some screenshots if you want. Amar, there is a prize. So what we're actually doing is I'll have a little quiz at the end. It's 3 simple questions, but they're based on the framework, so just keep vigilant. And Abdul and I will do a spot check, and the winner will receive a single license to our world recognized profiling tool and individual confidential coaching and mentoring from myself. So that's a really good prize. Hopefully thumbs up there for everybody. So just hopefully if you can keep yourself engaged, no worries, Amar, that's brilliant. So let's get going. So lead in 4D. What does lead in 4D mean? Well, you probably all are aware that we have digital leadership, and people talk about digital age leadership. And since coronavirus has actually globally taken the whole world by disruptive storm since March, leadership in a digital age has become something that is quite pervasive. So actually that doesn't tell the full story. So when we're talking to leaders about digital, they often just default to technology, and that's not necessarily the best thing for us when we are leaders and change agents and working on digital transformations. There's something much broader that we want leaders to understand, and a much broader capability that we want them and ourselves to actually develop. So it's about digital data disruption and design. Now, design is very important, because design is the application of technology for good. And also it takes into account the ethics that are so poorly developed and so poorly focused and resourced at a leadership level in terms of the shadow side of digital design of products and services. And I don't know whether you seen some of the movies that are out there at the moment, but the social dilemma and things like screen time, how all of the big tech giants are starting to use behavioral statistics and neurobehavioral techniques through machine learning and AI to design more addictive products and services. Now, we as leaders and change agents really do need to understand, so tech for good, but also that shadow side of technology as well. So that's where the design piece comes into it. So that's what we mean by 4D. Today's agenda, what do we want to go through? I will talk to you very briefly about who we are as an organization. And Abdul, thank you so much for sharing with everybody a little bit about myself and my own history. So that's great. We want to talk about why. In the Simon Sinek world, start with why. So why is a mindset shift so important for leaders today, so important for us all as change agents today? So we'll talk a little bit about that. And before we talk to the 7 mindsets, I want to just share with you a little bit about our framework, and then hopefully we will have time at the end to have a question and answer session that Abdul will moderate for us. So thank you in advance for that, Abdul. Before we begin, obviously, I know that you've probably all been on lots of Zoom meetings or WebEx meetings today already. I would, though, like to have a little bit of an indication of who's on the session today. So we've got two questions, two very brief poll questions that we're going to start with. One is about your role in terms of change, and one is about your role in terms of digital transformation. Now, Abdul, do you have the the first two poll questions ready to go live? Would you like me to start sharing?
I will share it, yes.
Perfect. So here we go. So what percentage of your role is currently devoted to change? Are we ready for the results now, Abdul?
As of now, we still have 20 seconds more, and the highest answer goes to 50%.
Okay, okay.
Yep, we have 50%. This is the highest one.
Okay, that's great. Let's go to the next question. So there's about 50% of you that are in the world of change. So maybe that's project change, maybe that's behavioral change. So that's good.
And here we have the question number 2.
Cool. So are you involved in any form of digital transformation? Now that could be a cultural digital transformation, a digital transformation of a product or a service, part of a project, team. So yes or no on that one?
As of now, the majority goes for yes. As we
Brilliant.
have like 40, now it's okay, it's counting 44 attendees, whom they replied with yes.
Fantastic.
A minority with no.
Okay, that's great. So that's really important to me because it just gives me an understanding of who we've got in the room, the virtual room today, vis-a-vis what we're talking about. So that's fantastic. So as I'm talking about leadership and change in a world of 4D, for the majority of us in the room that have said yes to digital transformation, that means that everything I'm talking about today is directly related to you. And for those of you who are 50% involved in change, well, actually, that's a little bit of a misnomer because we often do that when we're working with leaders and we ask that same question. And we have, you know, sometimes we even have people say 5%. And we actually say, you know what, the real answer is, even if we're formally involved in a change project, each and every one of us is involved in change naturally. So the mindset is that we should all be thinking that we're part of evolutionary change. So the real answer to question 1 is 100%. But it's great to know that answer 2 is predominantly everybody with regards to being involved in digital transformation. That's really cool. Abdul, thanks for that. That's brilliant. You're my sidekick today, so that's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on. Who are we? Well, we are Adapted Digital, and we're an organisation who are a global authority on the evolution of leadership and change for a world of 4D. Now, the secret word there is evolution, and what that means is we dedicate our time in live environments with leaders and with customers, as well as in research, continually evolving leadership and the profile of change agents for a world of 4D, because it's not static. So we are a global authority of the evolution of that, and that is fed into our best practice framework for exactly the same leadership and change in a world of 4D as well. That means that our framework is a malleable framework. The most important thing for us is that leaders today as profiles need to be the change you want to see around us. So it's all about role model leadership. It's all about followership leadership. And the reason I say that is that today, if you think about change and you think about digital transformation, it's no different from the anthropology of society since millennia. So if you think about societies and communities and small communes, what you will see is that when there are times of change, cultures change by looking up. And when we look up, if we can see the change that is asked of us in the leaders around us, then we are more likely to trust and believe it, and we are more likely to follow it. And that really gives us the key difference between a project and program of digital transformation and a people movement of digital transformation. And I just want to stress here, when I say the word leadership, I'm not just talking about leaders by label, I'm also talking about change champions, just as we have on the call with us today. So if we are to be the change we want to see around us, that means that it's not just about loads of knowledge. It's not just about us becoming knowledgeable and experts in one area, maybe technology or maybe change or maybe organizational development. It's not just about that. It's something about mastering our inner selves as leaders. And that's something that has become more and more diluted through the industrial age of old, and it's become muted. And we have lost the ability to master our inner leader. And even when you look at executive leadership programs in the marketplace, they have become decreasingly focused on that inner leadership mastery and more focused on that external mastery. So for us, it's about bringing leaders and champions of change together to not just master what we do, but also to master that inner self. And if we do that, we are able to stand out from the crowd. And the secret to digital transformation success is that ability for us not to be part of the mass competition, but for us to stand above the competition of the masses and actually to shine in terms of our uniqueness. The way we do that is very unique as well. So in terms of our positioning, we are quite disruptive when it comes to how we approach executive leadership and change development. Because we focus on community as well as micro learning, it allows us to do two things. It allows us to actualize our potential by experimenting and experiencing. So not only to experience new things by community with others and sharing, also need a safe haven to experiment with new things so that when we go back into our daily practice and our environments, we can experiment in there with a little bit more of a little bit more confidence. I've just got a question that's come up here by Nawab. In your opinion, which really matters, mastering ourselves or what we do? For us, Nawab, I would say it's a balance of both. I think we really need to start to get a balance of those, and they have, over the last few decades, become very imbalanced. So part of our mission as an organization is actually to bring that balance back to the way that we design and deliver leadership and change competency development. So great question there. Thank you so much for asking that. And another approach that we use in terms of delivering that is in the idea of habits and calibration. So calibration is what we call the 1% rule. I'll explain a little bit more about that to you all a little bit later. And habits is a very big part of our framework. And what we actually say is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So if we are all able to bring small habits into our daily practice, if we are all able to calibrate 1% across the different areas of our daily life and our daily practice increases, then what that means is we are able to master externally what we do as well as internally who we are. And that's the approach that we take as an organization. In terms of our footprint as an organization, this is just a little bit of a tactical slide for you, but we are an international organization. We work across public sector and private sector. Predominantly public sector for us is government. We do work with not for profit, but our heartland really is working with governments as well as private sector, and that is finance, industry, manufacturing, publishing, fast moving consumer goods, etc. We have a global practitioner community. So we have a community all over the world, just like yourselves, like PMI, of practitioners that are trained and certified in our framework, who then can use the framework to integrate in their own change or their own leadership development programs, in their digital transformation initiatives, and also to deploy our products. They have access to our licenses. So that's a really big thing for us as well, our global community of practice. And that's really it, really. So on the right-hand side, you can see that that global community is where we very, very much focus ourselves. What this does is it means that our framework becomes something which can sit on its own, or it can actually be something that can integrate and work within an existing framework. And that can be a leadership competency framework, or it can be an agile program framework, whatever it is. But it's really, really important for everybody here to know that this is something that is evolutionary, malleable, and adaptive. Everything that we do is grounded in philosophy as well, which is quite an important point to share with you. We are not psychologists, so we have a professor of philosophy that works with our digital team and our global community practice, and alongside our research, that is how we evolve the framework over time. So that's a little bit about who we are. I don't want to spend too much about that because that's not the reason why we're here today. That's just contextual. But I want to really start with why. Why is mindset so important as opposed to just another program that is knowledge focused? Well, really, the first thing I want to do is ask all of you that said they were involved in change, and also the majority of you that said that you were involved in some form of digital transformation, whether that's development rather than formal change projects. What I'd like to do is ask you another question. So Abdul, we're going to green light the next poll question. And this question basically asks you, what is the key challenge, in your opinion, to the success of digital transformation? So what would you believe, or in your experience even better, is the biggest challenge to digital transformation? Now, I know that we've given you some answers there. There might be something that is there that you feel that, you know, that might be a different reason that you have in your brain. But, you know, of the options that are there in front of you, if you can choose the one that you feel is the strongest and biggest challenge, that would be fantastic.
Well, Mel, the highest point we got it for the leadership, like this one, the highest point, and the next one is the governance.
Ah, that is brilliant. I think that's brilliant. We've got a great group online today. That's fantastic. You are absolutely right. And as you can see on the left-hand side of this screen, you know, it doesn't matter which piece of research you go into in a market growth. And by the way, that global digital transformation market growth statistic, you see that's pre-COVID. We know that it's 33% plus now already. I mean, that is just huge. And we know that if you look at any of the statistics out there, that what everybody is pointing to is leadership capability. We have really failed in applying the right leadership capability. And what they mean by that is changing the mental model of what leadership is all about. That is really, really, really important. And if we haven't got the right mental model from a leadership perspective, then that in and of itself dovetails into that second category that you all chose, which is governance. So really, leadership and governance kind of play into each other. And I think all of us that have been involved in projects and programs and digital transformations ourselves, we all know that governance and leadership really are, without question, the two most difficult and most challenging areas. So the reason why we actually start with mindset is in order to really start to shift the needle when it comes to that mental model. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go backwards to leap forward. So those of you that have been on any of my webinars in previous times will be familiar with this slide, and we call this the curve of change slide. And this is a fascinating slide, so please do feel free with attribution to use this slide. In terms of the research of where this slide has come from, it is aggregated research and anecdotal research from our years in the business of leadership development and change development and digital transformation. But what I'd like you to do now is I'd like to look at this slide, and the first thing I'd like you to do is look at that technology, that green technology line. And that line represents the maturity of technology over time, which you can see on the bottom. So what we're actually seeing is the volume of maturity against time. And the big thing to be aware of here, and many of you might be familiar with Moore's law, which is the exponential growth of processing power alongside the exponential decrease of size in terms of processing power. So what we have in our mobile phones today is actually probably more powerful than we would have had in a big, massive data center, a processing center 20 years ago. So it's incredibly important for us to understand the maturity of technology and that exponential growth. But you can see that there's a big spike there around about 2010, and that's, you know, a broad brush speaking. We have the explosion of the World Wide Web, 97, through Ellis's work. We have the 2007 iPhone launch. We then have the iPad launch, and we've got the social networks and so on and so forth. So we've got this amalgam. It's not just one thing that is maturing, but it's the convergence and it's the increased number of things that are maturing around technology. So the technology landscape is absolutely dramatically increasing. And now we're in a point where convergence is dominating, and we have the Internet of Things, and we have machine learning, and really the exponential growth of AI, and quantum tech is only around the corner, as we've seen in press. And then we look at the blue line, and the blue line is data. There are 2.5 quintillion bytes of data created every single day around the world, and that number is set to increase. That word quintillion didn't even exist in the English dictionary 10 years ago. It had to be invented because of that number. I mean, Lama can't hear anything. Abdul, can you hear me?
Yes, it's very clear.
Yep, okay, cool. Data is really, really important to us. The thing that we need to be aware of as leaders in a world of 4D and change champions in a world of 4D is that data now is pervasive. So we actually can't do anything unless we really recognize that data is a part of every conversation, that there's more than one right answer for any problem, and that data is equally inclusive of qualitative data as well as quantitative data. And it's time for us to now reintroduce intuition without bias into our decision making, which is part of our development as well. And then I come to the pink line, which is audience. Now, this is really interesting because audience is not customer. What we mean by audience is we mean the entire audience value chain. You have the first mile customer, who is your employee or your colleague or your peer. And then you have the last mile customer, who is the end user of the service or the product that you are taking to market or designing or deploying or changing. But in our world of 4D now, it's actually beyond that. We need to start integrating the environment, the society, and the community around us. We also need to understand that there are audiences between the first and the last mile customer. We have our stakeholders, our partners, we have our suppliers, and we need to treat them all exactly the same. So one of the misnomers of people saying I am customer centered is actually not the right way of thinking. That's not the right mindset. The human-centered mindset is the correct mindset to have, because it brings balance to every single audience, and it looks for the value contribution in every single one of the audiences in what we call is the audience value chain. Now, what this line means and what it represents is two things. Number one is choice, and number two is expectation. Back in the 1940s, the idea of the advertising agency was born in New York. And what that meant was, for the first time ever, you could go to the corner shop and not just buy the loaf of bread, you could choose which loaf of bread you wanted to buy based on the brand. And the idea of brand was born. That created choice within our consumer mindset. And that carried on through time. And when we actually started to bring things like the mobile phone into play, so technology became consumerized. It was no longer just for military. It was no longer just for business. It was now part of our private lives. When we launched the mobile phone, when we went into social networks, all of a sudden, not just choice exponentially grew, but our expectation grew. And what we see now, and I'm sure that we can all have got many, many stories of Generation Z and millennials, expectations of user experience have dramatically changed since all of this choice and all of these omni-channel products and services and online world has really exacerbated, even more so since coronavirus. So what am I saying here? Well, I'm saying that audience, technology, and data are all on a similar trajectory of maturity. But then look at business and leadership. Yes, without question, there have been models that have been introduced, and there have been spikes over the years. We've had things like Cynefin, we've had things like adaptive leadership and systems thinking, design thinking. We've had some great, and agile, how can we forget that? We've had some great things introduced, but nothing has really given us a holistic strength or power to really shift that needle up. And what that has done is it's done two things. Number one, it's meant that business and government and leadership profile and mindset, the mental model of leadership, has been left behind against the other three lines that are on the same trajectory. And the second thing is that when you put audience, technology, and data together, you get the golden triangle of digital disruption. So you can be 15 years old, sitting in your bedroom, creating an app that can disrupt an entire industry. So the impossible can now be made possible by somebody just with the power of their mobile phone. And we as change agents, we as leaders, and we in business and government actually need to be aware of it. And it doesn't matter the manufacturing sector or from the banking sector, all of these things are incredibly important to us. So how does that come out and play out in terms of our operating models when we're thinking about digital transformation, given the majority of us on the call today are in that world? Well, we have two things. If we were to talk about conventional business, which is basically business pre-digital transformation, and we talk about 4D business, which is business in the journey of digital transformation or post-digital transformation, of which there are very few organizations in that evolutionary stage, maybe organizations like Google or Giant, you could probably say are. But what we're looking at is this. Conventional business is really based on what's called a reductionist approach. And those of you that have gone through MBAs will be very well aware of this in terms of the Michael Porter approach. And what that says is, if we place all of our resource and all of our effort into our expertise, which basically supports silos, then we will be more profitable as a result. And that's the way that we've built our businesses since the 1930s. And in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, that worked because it was mathematically proven. So where we had money, where we had resource, we put it all into expertise because it worked. It made us more profitable, or in terms of government, it made us, it made the savings, and it allowed us to serve our citizens. That was a reductionist approach. What that meant from a leadership perspective is that leaders were focused on efficiency and profitability. So this is the capitalist approach, right? Focus on profit, not purpose. Focus on profit. Think about shareholder value. Content is king. So the leaders in our organizations were historically the people that knew more than anyone else. So they were the ones that we needed to go to for the answers. All this stuff is, you know, it sounds like it's so obvious, but actually the complexity of the world we live in now is still stuck in this legacy system. And that's why what we're trying to get out of. And this is where we look at 4D business. So all of us are in that world of digital transformation are really in some way, shape or form. I hope that there's something on this slide that you all recognize. We're trying to innovate. We're trying to become more outcomes focused because we know that if we focus on experience, if we focus on serving people rather than profit, purpose rather than profit, then performance does actually increase. And even since 2012, Capgemini, in their wonderful piece of research called the Digerati, actually have proven that if we put our focus and effort on people and experience, not efficiency and productivity, like the old Michael Porter, we will be up to 26% more profitable. What does that mean for us today? Happy people, happy business, happy shareholders. So it really does stand to the, you know, to testament that the access ecosystem is working and is more profitable than anyone else. And I've just got a chat here, which is really interesting, actually. I'm just going to, yeah, without doubt. So John Kay's book, and also there's another book, which is a fantastic book for you all to read. If anybody is an avid book reader. So number one, Obliquity is great in terms of John Kay. And another one is Gillian Tett. Now, Gillian Tett was the MD of the Financial Times. She was an anthropologist by trade, and she inadvertently became an economist. And she travels the world now talking about the access ecosystem. It is incredibly important. I know it sounds as if I'm going academic and theoretical on you, but actually this is really important for all of us to understand. Yeah, absolutely. Let me just put, so it's Gillian Tett, and it's called The Silo Effect. And then John Kay, Obliquity. Fantastic. So this is what leadership looks like. So leadership in a world of 4D actually looks incredibly different. And it's almost like a sack of cement is taken off your shoulder when you look at what we can see here, that actually we realize that it's our job as leaders to identify problems, to identify the challenges, to identify the questions that need the answers. It's not our job anymore to know the answers. There is no single right answer anymore. So it's problems that rule. Decision democracy, therefore, results out of that. That basically means, you know what? If there's more than one right answer, that means we need more people to help build those answers, which is why design thinking has become so incredibly popular over the last 10 years, because it allows the democratization of decisions and ideations. And when we have ideas, what do we have? We have innovation. Innovation doesn't happen unless you've got more than one idea that comes together, because innovation is when ideas come together to spark, which is really, really important. So it would be crazy for me to talk to you about leadership and change in a world of 4D if we weren't to really talk about COVID-19. And I'm sure that you have all been on lots and lots of webinars talking about this subject. So all I want to do here is to nudge towards the reality and to talk to you about what COVID-19 really has meant to us. And what I'd like to do, Abdul, I think we might have had this as a poll. I'd prefer to do this in chat, actually, if that's okay, because I'd like everybody to just pop into chat. Since March of this year, in terms of how COVID has affected you, yourself, maybe your teams or your organizations, I'd like to know from you, what one single thing would you like to see continue on post-COVID or from that original lockdown, what one positive thing would you like us to continue to take into business from well, there we go, Abdul, you've actually put a word cloud up there. That's brilliant. So Abdul's put a word cloud up there. You go.
The same. I think the people, they can answer in the chat box.
Okay, no worries, no worries. So yeah, either. So what is it? What do you think? What's one thing that you've actually thought to yourself, you know what, I would really love this to continue, and I don't want it to stop. I don't want it, you know, because we know we're not going to go backwards. We know that we're all working towards a new norm now. So what parts, what aspect of new norm would you like to see? Anybody? I certainly know, you know, for me, there's something very much about, with all of the Zoom meetings that I've been on over the last 6 months, I've seen leaders, CEOs in informal clothing that I've never seen before in informal clothing. I've seen cats walk across screens. Exactly. And I can see somebody here, Kathik, that said personal aspects and empathy without questions. Yeah. And I like Mohammed. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we don't have that commute. Certainly here in the UK with London. I was talking to somebody in the digital, one of the biggest digital agencies yesterday, and she was saying to me that productivity in her team has grown by 30%. 30%. Digital documentation, absolutely. You know, what we thought impossible in January has actually now become possible, hasn't it? And it means that we are a lot better at adaptiveness and change than we first anticipated. So a little bit of resistance to change, I think, is, you know, no excuses anymore, right? So what I've got on this screen here is two things. What we really believe at Adapt to Digital and the Lead in 4D team, we believe that digital transformation has definitely accelerated, and that's happened, which is positive. The impossible has become possible, and I've just seen remote work, you know, remote meetings come up here. A lot of the government customers that we work with have greenlit things like Zoom meetings that they actually had locked down through security firewalls prior to COVID. But now they've realized that they can actually work around that and still maintain the safety and security of their individuals. So impossible has become possible. But I think, you know, everybody, I think humanity, we've realized that we are humans again. We have got technology that has matured to a point that, you know what, we can actually, for the first time, let the robots do the robot job, which means we can be the humans again. Wow, brilliant. What does that mean for digital transformation? That's the questions that we should be having in our brainstorming meetings. And also, I think that COVID-19 has really put a spotlight on some things as well. It has put a spotlight on the lack of leadership capability to successfully drive digital transformation. And, you know, just alongside working with the PMI, also with some of the other change methodologies that are globally recognized, and talking to some of these institutes and global societies, one of the things that we've realized is that project and program managers have actually, change managers have increasingly become more and more stressed over the last decade or so, because more and more onus and responsibility of the success of digital transformation has inappropriately been put on the shoulders of change agents and project and program managers. And the leaders have lost the ability to actually take a participatory role. And that's what our world is all about. We help leaders take the participatory and active role of digital transformation again, and not just sponsor it from the sidelines, because that's not what their job is. They need to actually be the role models. And one of the other things that we have noticed is that there is a significant lack of digital and data literacy within our workforces and within society at large, and it's something that needs to happen. And of course, ethics, which I mentioned earlier on. Just talking about ethics, and talking about the wider workforce. Look at this slide here. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but that COVID-19, in terms of what its impact on work, has actually been touted as the biggest workforce shift and relocation of skill since World War II. And you know, just ask you all, just in terms of you know, what some of the shifts and some of the relocation of skill. You know, pop it into chat if you have, you know, got in your mind what some of that could be. But that is super important. I mean, you know, the men went to war and the women started working in the factories. You know, here in the UK, we had the women going up in. Oh, the slides appear to be stuck. Is that right? Abdul, which slide is everybody seeing at the moment?
This is the graphs which you explained about. I think if you can do the sharing again, just close the sharing and share again.
Yeah, let me just bear with me 1 second. Abdul, what I'll do is I will actually share these slides with everybody from the end. Which slide can we see now?
What are the experts saying has shifted?
Perfect. That's brilliant. So my apologies, everybody. You've been listening to my dulcet tones, but not having any visual stimulation on the slide screen ahead of you. So I'll definitely share the slides with Abdul afterwards. So hopefully the slides will now not stick, but if they do, we know what to do about it, which is brilliant. So yeah, the biggest workforce shift since World War II. That is just so dramatic. And I think the other thing as well is looking at the last thing on the slide here, which is the you know, the catalyst for the new future of work: flexibility, diversity, and what I love, well-being. You know, we need to think of each other as human beings again, not as robots. I just think that is one of the most wonderful things that has happened in the world of leading 4D, certainly from our perspective. So let me bring this to a close before I talk about the next thing. Really, everything about change and digital transformation, leadership, and champions of change development for us is about not doing things differently. It's about a state of becoming. And this is really important. It's about a constant evolution. We need to be able to be constantly evolving, to be constantly becoming something, so that we can be prepared and keep pace with technology and data and behavioral shifts around us. So it's not an A-B point development schedule that we are looking for anymore. And that allows us as leaders to be more generalist. So it allows us to actually start promoting and rewarding people for who they are as human beings, as well as what they know, rather than rewarding people by label and that specific expertise. And this, again, is a nudge towards what I was talking about earlier on with the Gillian Tett silo effect and the networked ecosystem. We are already seeing, and we work a lot with global recruitment agencies, we are already seeing that champions of change, project managers, program managers, change managers, digital transformation directors, CTOs, CIOs, executive leaders are starting to be recruited and also internally promoted more and more for their generalist skills and profiles of humanity, rather than their specific expertise area or just because of their experience. And that's a really important thing. So let me shift the atmosphere of this webinar a wee bit and start talking to you about our framework. So the framework has two parts to it. It has the first part, which is the structural, the nuts and bolts, which is what we call the Dilyn Way what. And then we have the approach. So how do we create an evolutionary habit for people to change on an ongoing basis? And I love the fact that somebody said agile there. You're absolutely right that, you know, there is so much There's so much power, and there's a wealth of behavioral shift and ways of working that we can look towards Agile, as are other methodologies as well out there. So when we look at the Dilyn Way Framework, generally speaking, what we actually see is we see a set of values. We see the mindsets and the 7 principles, and we also see what we call the 4 P outcomes, which I'll speak to you about in a moment. But the delivery of how for us is what we call a 4-stage habit cycle, which is a cyclical evolution of 4 stage habit shifts. Now, to make it a little bit easier for everybody to understand our framework, because the body of knowledge of the Dilyn Way Framework, the Lead in 4D framework, is actually quite comprehensive. And in today's webinar, it's, we don't have enough time to actually go into the entire body of knowledge. And we also want to talk about the 7 mindsets. But if we were to imagine, so here's a thought experiment for you. So close your eyes and think. If this was a novel and it was a whodunit novel, a thriller novel, and we went to the very back page to see who did it, so rather than reading the whole book, what would we see? This is what we see. This is what we would see on the slide here. We would see maturity and evidence in our leaders and change agents of driving digital transformation. Now, it's really important here for you to understand what I mean here. It's not just being a role model of change through being an early adopter, because that's very easy for a lot of people to grasp. Being an early adopter of technology, being an early adopter of ways of working, Office 365, etc. It's also being an early adopter of what we call experimental practice, which is not Agile. It's a very, very different thing to Agile. Experimental practice is not to be confused with Agile. It's a precursor, and it's something which is a habit and part of the mental model mindset. It's one of the 7 mindsets. But it's about leaders driving digital transformation and embedding it within their leadership practice. So it's not, oh, I've got a meeting today at 3 o'clock on digital transformation project. I'll switch my brain into action at 3 o'clock, but for the rest of the day, it's business as usual. This is about actually embedding it in who I am as a leader. That's really what we mean by role model leadership, role model of change. And on the right-hand side, human-centered approach. So if you remember that graph earlier on that was stuck, it was stuck there for a reason for you all to emblazon it on your brains, is that we want to become more human-centered as leaders, because now is the time that we can reconnect with our humanity. And that is really global and local community leadership. What I mean by that is number 1, our inner well-being. So we really need to think about our heart set, our soul set, and our health set, as well as our mindset, and also the well-being of people around us, which is the safety and the prosperity of our peers, our teams, and all of the people that we serve in our products and services. And it's also that networked effect of diversity and inclusion. If we take that down another level, this is what we see, and you might remember this from what I spoke about at the start. What we want to do is we want to think about how we individually ourselves can recognize and understand what are the unique skills that are emerging in this world of 4D that I need to lean into or need to help leaders around me develop competency in, to master what they do or to master what I do. Things like experimental practice, data mindfulness, flow, if you've heard about flow, and attention management as opposed to the old system of time management. And also on the right-hand side, deepen our human qualities in order for us to master who we are. Things like intuition, presence, innovation, creativity, empathy, innovation, all of those wonderful things that the machines still can't do. So as the machines take over transactional tasks, that means we open up time for us to become more human and more creative, innovative, present, and empathetic. And that's really important for us. And that allows me now to start talking to you about those 7 mindsets. So back to this slide, thinking about these unique skills, thinking about these the deepening, the reconnection with our human qualities, and making them explicit and celebrating them so that others around us can follow. What we want to do is we want to break that down even further so that we can recognize and measure where our start point is. And we can also create developmental pathways for individuals like ourselves, for groups and cohorts like PMOs, change teams, executive leadership teams, and even for some of our customers, entire cultures. So that's where the 7 mindsets break down. They allow us to structurally create something that we can measure a start point against and then create a development pathway for ourselves. And here are the 7 leadership principles and mindsets. So a couple of things to be aware of here for everybody on the screen. I'm going to do a quick check. Can everybody see a screen that says 7 leadership principles and 7 leadership mindsets? Abdul, what are you seeing on the screen? Are we all good?
Yes, we can see the slide for the lead in 4D digital adaptive connected.
Yay, that's a high five. That's brilliant. That's fantastic. Woohoo! Excellent. Brilliant. So what do we need to be thinking about? So what I'm pretending that you're all practitioners now for a moment. So what I say to our practitioners is this: the 7 principles and mindsets are holistic, which means that we do not want to see or celebrate somebody that might be an outlier in digital or data informed at the expense of maybe open or audience focus, because what that will do is that will cause an imbalance in their holistic profile. And let me explain that to you even further. If somebody was really mature in digital and data informed and maybe future focused, they'd have loads of ideas. They'd understand about technology and they'd be able to create these most amazing, innovative ideas and innovative change programs and visions and strategies. If they were to take those visions and strategies to a leadership team or to a governance board that were maybe of low mindset in open and audience focus, do you know what would happen? They wouldn't get that change agreed. They wouldn't get it green lit because of the anthropology that I was talking to you about right at the start. We need to bring in credibility of who we are. We don't want to bring in just what is right. We want to bring in who is right in terms of ourselves. So that's the mastery of ourselves. So if that individual was to go into that same boardroom meeting with that same innovation strategy paper, and they were role models, they were a credible disruptor, I can tell you that everybody, yes, not to the paper because they might not even understand everything in the paper, but they would be saying yes because they would follow that person. When the innovation comes knocking on their door, they know that that person is somebody that they could follow. So it's incredibly important for us to understand that the 7 principles are all holistic. We want to be calibrating and creating habits across all 7 principles and dialing up on an evolutionary scale in order for us to sustainably and regeneratively be a successful leader and change agent in a world of 4D. And it starts with our mental model, which is what you see on the right-hand side there. So let's look at these in a little bit more in a little bit more detail now. So digital. I mentioned digital as number 1 as the native mindset. And what that means is, yes, we're an early adopter. So if we think about being an early adopter, it means that we're always on the lookout for being the first person to step into change and have a go. Just step into change and have a go and not wait for it to come knocking on our doors. That's a key sign of a native mindset in a leader. And the next one is a developer mindset. And this is really interesting because this really nudges the idea of making connections and integrating different technologies. That's the developer mindset. So in a very, very simple way, I was working with a leader on Friday, creating some habits for him as a very senior leader in government. And what we were doing was we were just creating tiny little automatic rules in his Office 365 Outlooks so that he could actually start automating his inbox, his emails. Something as simple as that. All he was doing was creating a tiny little 1% calibration and a new habit. And then he was just starting to become familiar with the idea of the 1% rule and habit shift, the habit cycle, and that developer mindset. And also the Gen Z mindset, the 5th generation in our workforce. Did you know that it's the first time ever in the entire history of work and business that 5 generations are in the workplace? It's incredible, isn't it? And what does that Gen Z mindset really look like? Well, one of our global practitioners is a global expert in Gen Z, and she often talks to the idea of a Generation Z is very different to the millennial mindset that was, is the nickname of the meme generation. So looking pretty on Instagram. The Gen Z mindset don't really care so much about how they look, but what they're interested in is values. They're interested in purpose. They're really more interested in the environment. So they're more likely to take a job with you if you can prove to them that the work environment will map to their values and to their purpose in life. They're not after the paycheck. They're not after the job title. They want to know that you have got the same values as them as a human being. So you can see that humanity coming in again. What is interesting here is that we are noticing that that the Gen Z mindset are likely to actually have a higher attrition. So they will stay in roles for less time. So they'll basically hop from job to job to job more than any other generation, because we're so behind on digital transformation and because the leadership mental model is actually not at where it can be. So yet again, a really important time for us in Adapt to Digital and Lead in 4D. We work with predominantly all of the big management consultancies, the big 4 globally. And one piece of work we've done with one of those big 4 leadership groups is helping them disrupt their own model, because management consultancies have historically brought on board graduates, and these graduates have been able to come on board, and what they do for the first 2 years is they create fantastic PowerPoint presentations, but they're not allowed to go to a client meeting because of hierarchy, because of the old established way. But actually the Gen Z are coming in and the first thing they're saying is, I want to go and sit in that client meeting. So we've got to change our structures. We've got to change the deeper areas of our business in order to keep those Gen Zs in our organizations and to thrive with us. And to do that, we have to change our leadership model, our mental model. So adaptive, principle 2, experimental mindset. I've mentioned this before. So this is about thinking and acting experimentally. This is something that is very, very famous person. All know Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein created the idea of experimental thinking and experimental practice. What this says is that before we start thinking about agile projects and programs, before we start thinking about the agility of our behavior within the moments of our everyday life, we need to remember as leaders that moment to moment there are decisions to be made. Now, every decision has more than one right answer. For the first time ever, there are multiple right answers to any given problem, any given question. And if that's the case, we want to experiment with as many of the right answers before we choose one. And that's really important, that's really, really, really important. So please, the next time that you're thinking about or you're presented with questions, you're presented with decisions, think about experimental practice. Think, wow, I remember that webinar that Melanie was talking and talking and talking, but one thing I remember is experimental mindset. She said there was more than one answer. So if there's more than one answer to this question that I'm being presented to with now, what could the possible answers be? And what could the possible outcomes therefore be? Shall I have a meeting or a discussion with somebody to think about that? And from those, what we get is resilience. We build our resilience. And from that, what we do is we build our inner presence and ability to act in the moment as leaders. And from there, we build resilience, which brings us to the 3rd mindset, which is the networked mindset. Oh, it's brilliant for us to be networked. That's not what I mean in terms of the traditional idea of being connected. It's not about how many likes we've got on Twitter. It's not about how many people we're connected to on LinkedIn. This is about how we can evidence and actively broker connections between people and people and things. So what this is about us as leaders always on the search of meeting, part of a project, part of a strategy, thinking about connecting people with people, diverse, being inclusive, people with things. How can I get that data to that person? How can I connect people with information? How can I open up information? How can I bring people together in a more diverse and in a more inclusive way? That will allow us to think about that networked ecosystem. And for us, in terms of our inner mastery, we start to bring in the heart, the mind, and the body, how we think and how we behave and how we act. It is incredible, some of the work that we do, believe it or not, on breath exercises for project managers and for senior executive leaders, just to help them to build power in the moment of now in order for them to increase their agility. And their peak performance increases by 30% plus just by us doing very, very simple breathing exercises. And that brings us to open, the transparent mindset, which is where we are authentic, which is where we exercise what we call yin and yang. Let me explain what yin and yang means in this instance. Yin is where we are authentic. It's where we bring our true selves to every situation and we're able to show vulnerability. Even if it went wrong, we show it. And what I say here to a lot of people is, don't wait until it's wrong. Just share what you are doing with someone, share what you are becoming with someone, rather than waiting until you're at the end state and it's either a yes or a no. If you share what you are doing, if you share what you are becoming, there doesn't have to be a right or the wrong at the end, because what you're doing is you're bringing somebody on the journey with you. That's the open leadership. And then the yang is what we call transparency. And that is where we enable and where we empower everybody around us to access what they need in order for themselves to thrive in a world of 4D. So this is a very important one for you all, because a lot of the time when we work with senior executives, we say to them, you know, what's your biggest challenge? And they say, well, there's some things we can't do. And they'll say, oh, you know, the system won't allow us to do this. And we've got policy here and we've got rules over here. And we say, oh, that's interesting, but you're the leaders. If not you, then who? So there's something really important here for us to remember, that we need to encourage the leaders and also to build our own strength, to actually build courage, so that we ourselves can actually drive and champion transparency in the deeper areas of our business: governance, operating models, policy, legislation, etc., etc. Data mindfulness. Data mindfulness is very, very important to us. It is a lot to do with decision making. And if you think about it, we've all probably come across the idea of mindfulness, haven't we? So I would imagine that we've all in our head have got an idea of what mindfulness is. It's stillness, it's being in the moment. Some of you might practice mindfulness. Just put the word data in front of it. What does that make you think? Be mindful about data. It's that easy. Digital literacy is about being mindful about data, the decisions that we make, the data that we create, that we pass on, being safe around data and ethical, being more data-driven in our decision-making rather than process-driven. We do a really good exercise, which is called the decision-making game, and people take a diary and journal the decisions that they make throughout a week. And we come back and we have a coaching circle to have a look at the results. And we look at how many decisions are data-driven versus process-driven, how many are future-focused versus past historic, how many are quantitative, data-driven versus qualitative and quant on balance, all of these different things. It is absolutely incredible to become more data mindful as a leader. And then the penultimate mindset is the prepared mindset, being future focused. Most important here is the frame of reference. And we say we must, as leaders, have as forward a looking frame of reference as an outward looking frame of reference. Let me explain. Forward looking into the future with trends and predictions is really about not just new tech, and new tech is artificial intelligence. New tech is robotic process automation. New tech are things that are already starting to become mainstream. Emerging technologies are what they are, emerging technologies. And every leader and champion of change really has a duty to understand the strategic implications of what's going on in terms of the world of e-tech. Something might be happening in the retail sector with augmented reality, as we are already seeing, by the way. And they might be able to say, wow, you know what, in terms of health and safety for the manufacturing sector that I'm in, I could bring that idea of augmented reality into my reference and my environment and can do the same thing. And this is what I was teaching in Disney, is just starting to bring the outward frame of reference with the forward frame of reference, taking from other industries and other sectors innovation and making it, cross-referencing it into relevancy for our own sector. It's a really, really area and really exciting for me. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about that, then just let me know at the end of this webinar, and I'm more than happy to have a chat with you about that. Being design aware, I mentioned that at the start. I'm not going to spend too much more time on that because I've only got a few more minutes left, because I'm really keen on some Q&A time. But, you know, I've mentioned these 3 points here: design aware, prediction and trend, becoming, not doing. Wow, you know, everybody, it sounds so simple, but it actually is quite difficult for us to, you know, take effect in. And lastly, but not least, is human-centered. The human-centered mindset since COVID-19 has been the biggest single accelerator of a digital transformation success. Bringing humanity back into the workplace, bringing humanity into digital transformation, bringing humanity into projects and programs, making them about people movements and not about structural or just project shift. And even if we're thinking about service, and even if we're thinking about products and digital transformations that feel that they're not even directly related with humans, just having a human-centered mindset allows us to actually be more profitable and more successful at just taking a human-centered approach. And something here, hyper-personalization. Has anybody heard of the term hyper-personalization before? Just pop a yes or a no in chat, if you will. I'll explain hyper-personalization for those of you that haven't heard about it. Hyper-personalization has actually been sprung out of the consumer market. So, you know, organizations like Alibaba and Amazon and Google and Apple, they are gurus when it comes to hyper-personalization. Oh boy, do they know how to do this stuff. And what it means is you no longer, when you're designing products and services, think about audience groups. You don't segment people, even to the smallest degree, even socioeconomic. You don't group people. You get to know people by who they are as a unique individual. Because we've got artificial intelligence and we've got so much data and we've got the maturity of technology, and also because people are willing to share their data with us, it means that we can actually know that your name is Ahmed, and we know that you can share with us your preferences. We can start to relate to you on a human level, and we can start to design our products and services for you, as well as start to design our products and services for Mohammed, which might be slightly different, but they will work for you. That's the power of where we're at in a world of 4D now. So they are the 7 principles and the 7 mindsets of mastering what we do and mastering who we are. So that if we are able to understand where we are currently, be able to calibrate 1% up and to create habits of change internally and externally, and just keep shifting the needle in our leadership practice, in our change practice in these areas, we can start to stand out from the crowd. And certainly as individuals as well, we've been doing an awful lot of philanthropic work for people that have lost their jobs through coronavirus. And what we've been doing is we've been helping them adopt the 7 mindsets and the 7 principles to build their mastery of what they do and who they are themselves, so that they can not be part of a big pool, a big competitive pool of people going for jobs. They can actually stand above the crowd and celebrate their uniqueness, so that they can actually be shortlisted and be recruited ahead of the game. Now, what does that all mean? What does it mean as an end game? What do we become as a result of this focus, as a result of focusing on our own leadership development in a world of 4D? Or as practitioners, what could we look to see in the leaders or the change teams around us being able to evidence? Well, we will be able to lead more efficiently and courageously with purpose. We actually really understand our profiles and our brand, so we can have more authenticity, we can have more courageous conversations, we can speak truth to power, but we can do it in a way that is authentic. We can do it in a way that is more open. And also we are more prepared, which again gives us confidence, but it's what we call the psychology of possibility. If we are more prepared, and if we're able to be present and lead mindfully in the moment, then we actually then start to build in what we call neuroplasticity, which I know is a big word for a Sunday afternoon. But actually what that means is our brains are only just now scientifically being understood as being muscles. So they are like every muscle in our body. They can grow. We didn't think our brains could grow before, but they can grow. We can create new neural pathways. And as long as we can courageously keep doing things differently, which is calibrating 1%, and as long as we consistently practice habits, which is the habit cycle, we can build the neuroplasticity of our brains, and we can be constantly becoming leaders in a world of 4D. I am very, very conscious that I have talked for an incredibly long time, and I do apologise, but the body of knowledge of the Dilyn Way Framework and the 7 mindsets, I am incredibly passionate about, and also on our mission, it's so important. But what I'd like to do now is open up a final poll before we do a very quick quiz time, and hopefully time for at least 1 or 2 questions. But first and foremost, if we can have a poll, what I would like to do is, oopsie-daisy, back to this slide. What I'd like to do is, looking at these 7 principles and the 7 mindsets that you see in front of you, the first thing that I would like to ask you is this. Thinking about the leaders that you work with, okay? So think about the leaders that you work with, the leaders that are above you, or if you're a leader yourself, it might be your peer group. What I'd like you to quickly do is I'd like you to think how mature they are across all of these. So don't think about which one of them per se, but think about which one of them is the what is their maturity. So Abdul, I just ask you to come off mute for a moment, and just for me to refamiliarize myself with the poll that we've got for this question.
Yeah, I will open it up now.
Brilliant, thank you. Oh, brilliant. We've got it for each one, haven't we, Abdul?
Yeah, this is question number 5.
Yeah, that's lovely. So very quickly, if I can ask everybody, Anne-Marie, lovely, excellent. So what we have is digital. So let's think about digital. We have got from very low all the way through to very high. So everybody in the room, let me think, who have we got here? Have we got a very low or a very high or a moderate maturity for the native mindset in our leaders around us? and connected and adaptive and open and data informed and future focused and audience focused. So this is a really, really thought-provoking poll question for you. And don't worry, you know, this is the good thing about this is it's an anonymous poll, but what I want you to do is I just want you to have the opportunity to reflect on this, using this framework, the maturity of the leaders around you and how that might be affecting your ability to succeed in digital transformation. That's the real key here. I've noticed that we've got a time limit of 5 minutes on this, Abdul. I'm wondering whether there is an opportunity for us to reduce that time limit so that we can go to the next question.
No issues. I can close it anytime. That I just want to summarize. Like for digital, we are getting the high, like the most participant, they went for high, and for the connected, they went for high also, and the adaptive, it is moderate, and for open, they went for moderate again, and we have for the data informed, again moderate, and the future focus, it's high, and the audience focus is high again. So this was the poll. I will close it and I will open the question number 6.
Perfect. Thanks, Abdul. Andrew is asking, is it possible to publish the poll results so that we can see them all? I'm not sure whether you're able to do that, Abdul.
I will try to publish it.
Okay, perfect. So the next one that I want you to, this is something that I'd like everybody to think about. This is just a little bit, you know, let's get a little bit more informal, and let's just, you know, because you don't forget the thing that we've got to do next quickly before we finish is a quiz. So I just want to get you kind of, you know, warmed up a little bit for a quiz. So globally speaking, which principle and mindset do you think is the strongest across leadership and change generally globally? Now, I know the answer to this because this is what we do, and we've got lots of global data, but I would love to know what everybody here in virtual room tonight thinks is the strongest principle. Which one do you think it is? It's an interesting one. We don't do global benchmarking, but obviously because we've got so much data, this is something that we look at when we update the framework. Incidentally, we update the framework twice a year. So with our global community of practice, there's a huge amount of work that goes into republishing the body of knowledge twice a year to help leaders and champions of change really drive the shift from digital transformation being projects and programs to being a movement of people. Right, I think we're time out on that one. What's the answer we've got there, Abdul?
And the answer was, for this one, it was the adaptive.
Ah, okay. Well, believe it or not, it's open. But the second highest is adaptive. So I love it. That's brilliant. So it sounds as if we've got some really clued up people on the webinar today. And what I'd like to do very quickly is ask exactly the same question, but now as the weakest. What do we think is the weakest mindset globally? Remember, this is a global thing now. Leadership generally, which is the weakest mindset at a leadership level, do you think? Nearly there, we're nearly there. And what I will say to you is that this has actually been the weakest mindset and principle since 2014. It has, year in, year out, it has consistently been the weakest mindset and principle for us in terms of our global work.
So we have it here, the audience focus.
Okay. Well, actually, the weakest is data informed. And again, well done, everybody. Very, very, very close. The second one is audience focused. So it's really funny. So everybody's chosen the second highest answer. So the first one, the strongest, is open. The second is adaptive. And for the weakest globally, it's data informed. And after that, it is audience focused. And here we go, the results. So the bar graph here is an interesting one. Okay, thank you for sharing that, Abdul. So I'm going to swiftly move on now, if that's okay with everybody, because I'm really conscious of time and everybody has got an evening ahead of them. So I'm going to skip some slides, but one of the things I just want to let you know is that I've talked a lot about what, and I've talked a lot about the framework in terms of the 7 principles, but it's really important for us to understand the how, because in leadership development and change development, we seem to, we do wonderful programs and we're very, very good at developing and designing courseware for people to understand what. But then when people go back into the workplace, that is really where we have found they need the most support. And that is the ability to adopt habits and the ability to implement what we call the 1% calibration technique in order to pump up their world. So here we go. Are we all ready? Please be poised with your, get your keyboards ready and your fingers working for the bonus quiz. Abdul, you and I are going to moderate this. So everybody, if you can put the answers into your chat area. Just 3 questions. Question number 1, which principle is the odd one out in the list you see in front of you? Is it number 1, digital, adaptive, connected, transferable, data informed, audience focused? Wow, 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 wow. Everybody's got the right answer. That is brilliant. Okay, that is amazing. I think it's less about who is right. I think it is who was first to be right. And I think we've definitely got the that one. So that's brilliant. We've definitely got a winner on that one. Let's see if you can continue on to question 2. Yeah, you ready? Which skill below is a unique and emerging leadership and change competency in the world of 4D? There is only one right answer. Is it 1, resilience? Is it 2, experimental practice? Is it 3, authenticity? Is it 4, media relations? Here we go. There's a few different opinions on there, but I can see some right answers, Abdul. I can see some right answers in there. That's fantastic. Yes, the right answer there is number 2. It is experimental practice. So yet again, it looks as if we've got some really good answers coming through there. This is the final one. We're nearly there for the free profiling tool and free coaching and mentoring with myself. To shift our mental model and behaviors, which 2 approaches below best support transformation? Is it 1 and 2? Is it 1 and 3? Is it 1 and 4? Is it 2 and 4? Is it 3 and 1? What is it? Tell me which one it is. Again, we've got lots of differing opinions. That's fantastic. And I can see that there are some right answers in. The right answer is 2 and 4, of course. It's the calibration of the 1% rule, which we call first principles thinking, and it's the application of new habits in the moments of our daily practice that allows us to build on top of calibration up to 5% increase in peak performance and productivity. Now, can you imagine being 500% more productive? That means you could do everything in one day and you can have a holiday for the other 4. If that isn't something to help you get interested and inspired and excited about the 7 mindsets of leadership and change in a world of 4D, I don't know what is. 5% increase in productivity. Thank you so much, everybody, today for being so incredibly engaged in chat. I think it's absolutely been amazing. And I think we actually do have a winner. We will announce it afterwards, if that's okay, because I just want to make sure that I double check with Abdul after this after the webinar finishes. And what we'll do is we'll get in touch with the wonderful lucky winner, who I think may be a lady, believe it or not. So I'll give you one clue. And that is somebody that will have a free license to our profiling, our leadership profiling tool, and some mentoring and coaching debrief session with myself. Everybody, you have been absolutely incredible. If you would like to know more about anything that you've heard today, if you would like to know more about becoming a practitioner yourself, if you just want to link in with me, if you just want to have a chat, then please do. And also, you know, I think that the PMI UAE chapter, I've been watching you over the last couple of months on LinkedIn. I've been looking at your forums. You are a unique and incredible community. I think you're fantastic. And for that reason, we've decided to give everybody a unique discount voucher, which is PMI UAE 20. Take a snapshot of that. If you would like to engage with anything, this is just for your chapter. I just think that some of the work that you guys do, some of the presentations and the discussions that you have are fantastic. From me, it is a huge thank you. You have been absolutely incredible today. I am delighted to have had the opportunity to speak with you, and I would love to come back to speak to you a little bit more about habits and calibration, or anything else if you'd like that. Let your hosts know, and I'm happy to come back. Abdul, over to you if we have time for a Q&A, but I'm just wondering, perhaps, maybe we don't, but if not, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that people might want to post to you in forum after today's webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Melanie. It looks like we've run out of time, but at least I think we can like take one or two couple of questions, maybe just to get some questions, because it's already 7:30. So I think we can extend like 5 minutes more. So if anybody has any question, please just post it in the chat. And thank you again, Melanie, for this one, and especially for the interactive part, because it was really interesting for the quizzes and competition between the audience.
Oh, no problem at all. My pleasure. So just waiting. Doesn't look as if there's any questions coming through. Would it be possible to share the presentation? Oh, without doubt. Yeah, we'll definitely share the presentation.
Yeah. No issues.
No problem.
I think we can keep it here, because maybe the people, they will take your LinkedIn and the voucher, everything. And also, just because now we are waiting if somebody will drop any questions, it's just I want to share with you, Mel, that it reminds me when you were speaking about, and especially for the graphs, that the businesses are always, it's not moving or not improving same other items. So there is like something, I read it a couple months ago, I remember, it's like culture eats strategy on breakfast.
Absolutely, it is. Strategy does eat, yeah, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the way you change culture is change the mental model of the people that drive change. So whoever is driving change, or whoever is responsible for change, what you do is you help them change their mental model, which allows the culture to shift. So that is the key. And I think I'm just looking at Karthik's question there. That kind of answers your question to that point. And it's it's the how, isn't it? And that might be something that we can actually maybe revisit again privately.
Anyway, thank you very much, Melanie. I think we've got one question from your experience. How do you see business leaders adapting to change and digital world? I think we will take just one question because it's already 7:33.
Yeah, sure. It is a very, very good. I think what I would say to you is that we are seeing a lot more to the idea of changing the way that they think since coronavirus. So if we are working with a group maybe of 20, maybe around about 20 leaders, over to about 50% change, and we only look for 60.5 because the curve of innovation of change. So we're looking to identify the people that can be the first movers, the first mover advantage for culture. So if we can help and identify 16.5% in a leadership group, then we know everybody, it's the tipping point and everybody else will follow. So we used to be able to get to around about 20%, but now actually what we're doing is we're seeing that we're pretty much pushing around 50% since coronavirus. There's been a really big shift since April for us.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Thank you for everybody. And I hope that we can have another event with PMI UAE, if you can give us some time of your precious time. And I think we'll close it here. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And good night, and see you soon in other events in PMI UAE. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.